everyone, and welcome to my new series, Famous Writers in History. I am so happy that you have joined me for the first episode, which is on Hilary Mantel of this new series that I am starting. If you haven't watched the announcement video, let me give you the lowdown real quick. Anyways, on the second Wednesday of each month, I am going to be posting a video that is part of this series, The Famous Writers in History, and it will be talking about three main things. It is going to be talking about a specific writer's life, their work, and also I tried writing like section because it wouldn't be an AuthorTube video without it. So here's the first episode, Hilary Mantel. So Mantel was born in 1952 in Derbyshire and grew up in an Irish immigrant neighborhood. While her family was not Irish immigrants, they were descendants of Irish immigrants, and that's why they kind of were in this group. And one of the most impactful things that Mantel talks about of this upbringing was her Roman Catholic faith. She discusses in some of her interviews about her non-traditional upbringing, and she kind of alludes to her childhood not being the happiest. So when she was about 7 years old, her mother moved her lover, whose name was Jack Mantel, into their home where they lived for about 5 years with her mother, her lover, and her father, along with her siblings. And then when Mantel was about 11, her mother and Mantel moved out of the town where she was living and grew up in to a different town, and Mantel kind of became her stepfather, and she officially took his last name. The entire family did. So Mantel went on to study law at the London School of Economics. After university, she kind of worked several odd jobs before marrying her husband, Gerald McEwen, in 1973. Sometimes she was working these odd jobs at the same time. The timeline is a little weird here, so I'm not 100% sure. Over the next decade, the couple lived in several different countries, but eventually returned to the United Kingdom. So while Mantel was in her 20s, she went through a series of health problems and was finally diagnosed with endometriosis. And this led to the full removal of any reproductive organs that she had, including a full hysterectomy. And this left her with the inability to have children when she was 27. When she was in her 30s, she began to publish. It was in 1985 that her first book, titled Every Day is Mother's Day, was published. And I have not read this, so if I get any of the details wrong, please forgive me. But it seems, from everything I read, it's a book that is inspired by Mantel's social work and is about a mother and a daughter's relationship, and the daughter is mental handicapped and is also pregnant. So it's kind of the mother and daughter working through their relationship and exploring that and exploring several themes throughout that as well. So between 1985 and 2005, Mantel published several books, gaining critical acclaim with each publication. And then in 2005, she started working on the series of novels that she would become best known for. And this is the Wolf Hall trilogy. So the Wolf Hall trilogy was years in the making. From the time that she started working on it to the time of publication was 4 years for the first book. And the first time that this idea came to mind for her, she was actually quite a bit younger. It was either when she was in her 20s or 30s. The timeline isn't 100% clear, nor is the source material. I think because this was all retrospective, when Mantel was in her 60s, kind of talking about this after she had published 2 of the books and on her way to publishing the 3rd. But that idea for Wolf Hall was kind of in the back of her mind, kind of percolating, coming up with ideas, kind of playing around with the idea of Thomas Cromwell, because Thomas Cromwell is a little bit more of a mysterious character. And I'll kind of get into this a little bit more. So in a talk given at Huntington Library, Mantel said that she had picked Cromwell because he is so complex and so mysterious. So not much was known about him, despite that he sat at King Henry VIII's right hand for many years. And we know a lot about that part of his life, but as Mantel says, we have his in tray, not his out tray. So we know a lot about the things that he was receiving and not a lot about the things that he was sending out to people, emissaries, courtiers that were visiting different countries, contacts he had from his time abroad. Cromwell was a soldier in the French army in his youth. They think he got to Italy at some point. He was in the Netherlands. So he kind of had a lot of contacts around Europe. And in relation to this topic, she said that one of the reasons why she picked it is because she would want a topic to exhaust her before she could exhaust it. And as writers, I think that we can fully appreciate this. I love that when I do a dive into a topic, I sometimes barely even come up to eat, sleep, or maybe have a nice cup of tea. So I like that she definitely went into this as well. So as I said, it would take 4 years from the time that Mantel started working on Wolf Hall to the time that it was published in 2009. But when it did, it seemed like this book was telling a story that nobody knew we needed. So the story of Cromwell starts in a village called Putney, which has now been swallowed up by London. London has become this like massive sprawling city. It was not that way whenever King Henry was reigning. It was actually still recovering from the bubonic plague. There was multiple times where it just came back over and over again, killing more people. And it actually took London about 2 centuries for it to fully recover the population before the 1390s, when the bubonic plague did hit. So, as the son of a brewer, Cromwell had a fantastical rise to power, first underneath Cardinal Wolsey, and then at the right hand of King Henry VIII. And this trilogy follows that. So the first scene in Wolf Hall, you see Cromwell as a youth, and then you skip ahead to where he re-enters the historical record under Cardinal Wolsey. One of the reasons Mantel sees Cromwell's story as so important is because Cromwell's story is such an archetypal story, and it's not, she did not create it that way. That is how he lived his life. His story is the story of a boy who leaves home and never looks back, who can't go back. And we see this all the time, especially as fantasy writers, of the hero has a catalyst that makes something happen, whether it be good, whether it be bad, that makes them leave their home and they either can't go back or choose not to go back. And we see that time and time again, especially in YA fantasy. We see that as a kind of story arc, and then eventually they do maybe return to their roots, but not always. Sometimes they end up becoming leaders and taking on responsibilities and stuff like that. And we see that with Cromwell, and Mantel does a fantastic job explaining that. So Wolf Hall was the first book that Mantel won the Booker Prize for, and then in 2012 she replicated this achievement with Bring Up the Bodies, which is the second book in the Wolf Hall trilogy, and this made her only the 5th person to have ever done that. And I think that is absolutely fantastic. It shows her contribution to the literary community right there. She continued to stick with Cromwell though, through his height of power and his catastrophic fall in the final book of the Wolf Hall trilogy, The Mirror and the Light, which was published in 2020. Mantel passed away in 2022 at the age of 70 from complications of a stroke. For the book review section, I actually did read The Mirror and the Light. I bought this one when I was on my last trip to the UK. The first 2 I had bought when I was in grad school. Here's what they look like right here. And it was gonna drive me nuts if they didn't match. So I actually was on a mission to find this. It took me 3 bookstores to actually find a copy of it, but I'm so glad I did. The text and stuff is a little, like, format is a little different than what you would see in a US copy, but it's fine. It's the same book. I do like the covers a little bit more. I do like the UK covers a little bit more. I just think they're prettier. So if I'm completely honest, I do find not only this book, but all of these books a little difficult to review. because it's so different than what I normally read in terms of fiction. I really want to take these books and annotate them and tear them apart, kind of like what I do with my history books, because that's how it reads. I want to compare it to the actual historical narrative. I think Mantel did a really good job from the way that she talks, the amount of research that she's done. She's probably the foremost expert on Cromwell. There may be only one other person that has written a biography on him that is like an actual biography versus a fictionalized account of his life. I really like it because Mantel does a really good job of taking those characters and placing it in a historical setting, but still feeling like they are talking to you. And damn, she did such a good job. So the whole trilogy I found absolutely entrancing. It was like being transported into the Tudor court with the descriptions and how she recounted the events that were going on. I think the books do paint a different portrait of Cromwell than what we have seen, not only as a man who wanted power, but also a man who wanted the best for his country. And whether or not that in retrospective it is what we agree with now is a completely different question. But I do think his motives were also what is best for his country, not only just for himself and his family. So I will say these books are dense. They take time to read, and not only because of the length. My Sarah J. Maas girlies will know what I'm talking about here. They make you sit with them to digest what you're reading. It's kind of like when you're eating a really good meat pie, the kind with like mashed potatoes on it, and you just have to step away for a moment before coming back to it and finishing and being ready to devour more. I love those pies. Those are some of my best pub food that I love. And I will say, I also did listen to the last book, The Mirror and the Light, on audiobook, and that's just because of time. There are some days that I can barely sit down and read a 10-page chapter before I fall asleep. Not to mention the 100-page chapters that sometimes pop up in here. I would be asleep in 2 pages. So, and I think the experience of listening to it while you're reading it as well also provides a different experience, and it's not a bad thing. I think listening to it and reading it in a hybrid form made me retain more of what was happening. It's kind of like how the characters are described and how they talk, and it kind of helps me with character recognition, because sometimes when I have a really large cast of characters, I can't always remember who's who from previous books or previous scenes, because there's just so much to keep track of, and my brain is only so big. And when I say this book is massive, it is 38 hours long to listen to. For context, those of you who don't listen to audiobooks, most are only 12 to 15 hours. Overall, I would recommend reading the Wolf Hall trilogy. I personally will be rereading these at some point, probably with my sticky notes and my pencil ready. Good morning, my lovelies. I got my coffee. I also have my notebook here. So today I am going to be doing Hilary Mantel's kind of writing routine. Ignore Luna. She sees something outside. But one of the things that I found really interesting, and I'm going to turn my computer back on here for a second, is that Hilary Mantel doesn't 100% have a set writing routine. She has her ideal day, but realizes that like life gets in the way, so sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. But I'm going to read a quote from an article, and it says, I feel shy of saying this because to non-writers it sounds so lazy, but if 7 days a week you can carve 2 hours out for yourself, then when you are undistracted and on song, you will have a book. So basically, she's saying that 2 hours a day, that's all you need to write. If you can get those in the morning, if you can get those in the evening, that's great. She likes to do them in the afternoon, it sounds like, but because of how my schedule is falling today, I'm going to be doing it in this morning. She also doesn't specifically say what type of writing she's doing, if it's like actually the writing part or if That also includes the research and editing and outlining. Hilary Mantel is famous for her research into the Wolf Hall trilogy. So I am going to be actually outlining today because it is October. So I am trying to get my Nano project at least partially outlined. So then that way when Nano starts, I can hit the ground running. And then once I get the first act kind of sussed out, I can kind of keep writing. Also, the project I'm working on is going to be like probably 120,000 words when I'm done, because it is more of a traditional fantasy. So it's going to be a little bit longer. I have my notes that I made all the way back in April, when I originally conceived of this idea, and it's been kind of percolating in the back of my mind since then. So I am going to take 2 hours today to sit down and outline and kind of see what I can get done with this. I'm not planning on writing anything. I have a scene that's like in my phone that I came up with while I was walking Luna one day, but so I'm taking this in the spirit because one of the things that Mantel was perfectly honest about was how long that it took her from the time that she kind of conceived the idea of writing Wolf Hall to the time that she actually did it. And that was 30 years. So she conceived of it in her 20s and she didn't actually start to sit down to write it until she was in her 50s. So that's kind of also like why I'm outlining. So for her, the research and the outlining and the entire process of writing was just as important as the physical writing. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get started. Like I said, I'm gonna set my timer for 2 hours and we are going to get some outlining done. So another thing I have to do today is also physically set up the Scrivener document. I have everything I need for the first 2 chapters to go up, but that's also pretty much all I have, like idea-wise, planned out firmly. I have what is supposed to happen in the first act written down. The way that I have the story is, okay, maybe I shouldn't say first act. Maybe I should say the first part, because the way I envision it is kind of 2 stories that are happening. One is shorter, only about 20,000 words, and it's setting up the second one, which is the big part and the meat of the story. So the first part is 2 POVs, and then once we switch to the second part, then it becomes 5. So I think I decided to do it because of the complexity and because I wanted to provide a lot more of that background without having to interweave it. And then also because I think that it shows the society a little bit better if by separating it. Does that make sense? I think it does. So, but I'm not 100% sure that's how it's gonna end up. I think it depends how the second part goes. So I'm gonna structure it like they're 2 separate books in the same document, I think. But one is gonna be more novella length, and then the second one is gonna be novel length. So in the future, if I do decide to query it and people are like, oh, we really like this, but the second part is more of the meat of the story, so we want you to kind of use that, and then we can publish the other one as a ebook novella later, I won't be against that. Hey everyone, editing Paige here. I realized as I was going through this video that my last clip had either gotten deleted or something weird and hinky went on with my equipment. So I just wanted to hop on real quick and give you my thoughts on the Hilary Mantel's like writing routine, because she doesn't have a set routine, because she just allows that creative space, like by blocking out a certain amount of time every day. I really like it, because that is something very similar to what I currently do. I block out half an hour, 2 hours every day, so that way I can just write. I can just work on something. I really liked it because I have been having such a hard time outlining recently, and it's just because my time keeps going different places, things keep popping up, so outlining keeps getting moved down to the bottom of the list, which I wish it didn't, but it was nice to be able to sit down and actually physically work through this. So yeah, but that is my thoughts on Hilary Mantel's kind of like writing routine. I will definitely keep up what I'm doing. And definitely use it not just for writing, but also for research and outlining and editing and all of the different creative spaces that you have to be in versus. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Hilary Mantel writing routine, and I am now heading to the outro. Thank you guys so much. So that's it for me today. If it's your first time here, hi, I'm Paige. I post videos on reading, writing, and travel related content, and I am so excited that you have stuck around with me for this entire video if you're at this point. Any videos that I have used for research purposes, I will link down below so you can listen to or watch the whatever clips I'm talking about. I took a lot from a bunch of different ones, so some of them are a little bit longer, an hour, some of them are 10-15 minutes. I have already drawn episode 2 for this series, and that is going to be Jane Austen. Like I said at the top, the series will post the second Wednesday of every month, so be on the lookout for those. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you guys all very soon with another video.